Ever feel like the resources and advice out there for women are missing something essential? I thought so too, which is why more than 6 years ago, I created She Said, She Said. I'm Laura Cox Kaplan, and after 3 decades in communications and then advocacy and now juggling motherhood and entrepreneurship, trust me, friend, I get it. Making a real impact takes more than just passion. It takes the right mindset, the right skills, the right investments, and the right community. On this show, we dive deep with incredible women from all walks of life who have been there. We uncover the secrets to building influence, navigating tricky relationships, and staying true to ourselves even when it's tough. And let's face it, it often is. I also throw in my own favorite productivity and life hacks, things that have shifted my perspective and might help you too. Wherever you are in your journey, my goal here is to leave you inspired to define success your way and to help you build the confidence you need to tackle your biggest goals. Subscribe today and let's unlock your full potential, your confidence, and your greatest influence. Hey friend, have you reached a point where the traditional corporate gig just isn't working for you anymore? You still want to work, but you aren't sure how to design and really structure your work so that it's a better fit for you and your family. Maybe you're desperate for more flexibility. Welcome back to She Said podcast. I'm Laura Cox Kaplan, and today we're diving deep into the world of the multi-hyphenate career with the incredible Fran Hauser. Now, what exactly is a multi-hyphenate career? Well, some might describe it as a portfolio career, or where the person who does the type of work could be referred to as a multi-potentialite. Now, frankly, friend, all those are horrible words and titles, but it's really about dialing into both your transferable skills, those things that you've learned to do in past jobs, and then combining them in new ways that allow you to lean more fully into things that you're passionate about, but to contribute in new and meaningful ways. Said another way, it's about creating a dynamic career that evolves with you and that allows you to blend different skill sets and interests into a unique and fulfilling path. And this week's guest, Fran Hauser, is the ultimate example. Now, Fran is a former media executive, a best-selling author, sought-after speaker, startup investor, and now a book coach. Now, seriously, is there anything she can't do? Fran left her high-powered role at Time Inc. to pursue a more flexible and fulfilling life, and she's joining us today to share some great advice about what she's learned. In this episode, we'll explore how Fran made this bold leap, how she built a thriving portfolio career that allows her to empower women to invest in startup businesses, and most recently, to help aspiring nonfiction authors bring their stories and their ideas to life in book form. We will uncover Fran's strategies for a smooth career transition. We'll talk about her 4-square model, which she actually outlines both in her book, Myth of the Nice Girl, and in her accompanying workbook, and how she built her latest business, which is called Bookbound. Here is episode 305 with my friend, the amazing Fran Hauser. Enjoy. Fran, welcome back to She Said, She Said.
Laura, I'm so happy to be here with you.
Well, I'm so happy to have you, and I am so inspired by the way that you have created your this next phase of your career and the work that you're doing and investing in. I'm so inspired, and so I'm really, really happy to have you here. You will recall, and our listeners may recall, that the last time we had you on She Said was about maybe 3 years ago, right after you published the companion workbook to Myth of the Nice Girl. And it was like one of our most popular. I actually did 2 episodes with you from that, which was so incredibly great. But one of the topics I want to talk about today is how you've created this portfolio existence that some people call
multi-hyphenate. I've heard it referred to as multi-potentialite, which is so hard to say and is sort of dying for a new term. If you ask me, that's a terrible word. But I would love for you to dig in a bit to get us started to talk about, was that always your vision when you left your big corporate job at Time Inc.? Was it always your vision to create this sort of portfolio existence? And did you have other, models or examples that you were using to kind of show you the way?
That's such a good question. So I know, first of all, the terms that are being used, right? Like there's the other one I've heard is slashy.
Oh,
Slash. I know. We
also
need to
awful.
coin a new term, Laura. We need to come up with something new.
Indeed.
For sure. But when I left corporate, and I had been in corporate for 20 years. And, at that point, I was president of digital at Time Inc. And, my goal was really to create a more flexible professional life for myself so that I could spend more time with my family. And it was just getting increasingly harder to do that in corporate. And so my initial thought was to move into startup investing, which was an area that was really just interesting for me. As president of digital, I was always meeting with startup founders. I loved meeting with them. I loved hearing about their businesses, their challenges, their product roadmaps, their fundraising. And so it was like the best part of my job at Time Inc. was meeting with these founders. And I thought, gosh, this could be really interesting if I really leaned into this and started my own investing practice, investing and advising. And so initially that was the idea. I didn't have this intention of creating, kind of a more portfolio approach. It was really focusing on investing and advising. And then what happened was, I realized that the book that I had always wanted to write, but I couldn't, I just didn't have the time while I was in corporate. Now I had the bandwidth. I had I had the energy, I had the time. And so I took that on. And, that was a whole thing, navigating publishing and finding an agent and doing all the things. But my first book came out, The Myth of the Nice Girl, a few years after I left corporate. So now I'm like a startup investor and I'm an author. And then guess what? Then I start speaking because I'm an author, right? So I have a calling card now. So a speakers bureau took me on. I've done over 200 talks over the last, 6 years, which has been really amazing. And then what started happening was women were coming to me saying, I have an idea for a nonfiction book and I have no idea how to get started. Like, what do I do? What are the first 3 things that I should be doing? And so very reactively, I was kind of just giving this free advice, and I realized, wow, I really enjoy this a lot. And I wonder if I could formalize this, which is how Bookbound started. Bookbound is really my platform where I help women develop and launch their books. And it is interesting when you say, like, when you ask if I had any role models, I kind of feel like when I started building this portfolio career, a lot of my friends and colleagues were doing the same thing. I started seeing a lot of my friends who maybe they had a PR agency, and then in addition to that, they started investing or taking on, board seats, taking on like some sort of activism, creating so I just started seeing this more and more. And I also feel like digital and, digital media has just made it easier to have a portfolio career because we each have our own publishing platforms available to us. So I feel like that's really kind of supercharged this whole like portfolio, right? Because we can each have a Substack, a newsletter, social media, websites. It's pretty easy to put up a shingle these days.
Endless opportunities.
Yeah. Endless. So yeah, the short answer is that wasn't my original intention. But what happened was because all of a sudden I had all this capacity, then that I didn't have when I was in corporate, it was like, okay, what else can I do? Oh, I can finally get that book done.
Yeah.
Oh, now with the book, now I can do speaking. So for me, I think it was so much about having more of this like abundance mentality and mindset, and also physically having the bandwidth, right,
Yeah.
to do more things.
Looking back, given that that was not your plan, for somebody who's thinking about, okay, how do I create this for myself? I'm curious as to how you think things might have been different if you had planned for these things versus just been open to the possibility once they didn't land in your lap, but something inspired you. You had an idea to to engage in different kinds of work as your sort of life evolved. So I'm curious as to whether you think you would have ended up in the same place if you had a plan, or if you were advising somebody how to do this. Is it better to have a plan, or is it best to just say, here's one thing I might want to work on and see where it goes?
I'm leaning towards the latter. This idea of like letting it happen organically. And for me, what's really worked is like planting these seeds. So it's like, think about it, even when I was in corporate and I started thinking about investing, I started doing it on the side while I was at Time Inc. because I wanted to make sure that I really liked it, like before I leave this incredible job, to go all in. And it's been the same thing really with every single new thing that I've taken on. It's always like, let me plant the seed. Let me see if there's a there. Is there a market? Is it something that I really enjoy doing? And then I go all in, So for me, I really like the idea of like being open and having the capacity, but planting seeds and kind of letting things happen organically. For me, I feel like that was like a really nice way for it to happen because I almost feel like if I had planned it all from the beginning, it would have been very overwhelming. And it also like gave me a chance to like really do the thing well.
Yeah.
Whatever the thing was, at first it was investing and then it was like writing the book and like, so versus like, I'm going to do all 4 or 5 of these things at once, which I think it would have been a lot.
Yeah, it would have been a lot, and probably you might not have gotten as much value out of the learning process, right? By taking things on maybe one at a time or doing a couple things at one time, you're able to really invest in the creativity and the learning that comes from that, the exploration, sort of allowing it to build and evolve. And when you're doing it on a kind of solo basis, right, without a team around you, especially if you're moving from a corporate role into a more or less solo role, the overwhelm of having to be the person who thinks and creates and does all the things is in and of itself really overwhelming at times, especially if there's multi-dimensions to it.
Absolutely. And I agree with what you said about the learning. I mean, I couldn't have done Bookbound if I hadn't written the book first.
Yeah.
Right? I had to go through the process and figure out how to navigate this industry, the publishing industry, and come up with my own processes that work, right? In order for Bookbound to make sense. So I do think there's a little bit of a, it's interesting. When I was at Time Inc., a lot of what I did was develop digital products. And we had sometimes we used a waterfall approach, which really means like you have to get this done before you can do this, before you can do the next thing, right?
Very structured.
Very structured. And then like the, other processes were more like you could kind of do things in parallel. And I feel like building this portfolio career for myself is a little bit more waterfall. It's more of like, I do this one thing and then I learn and I see like, where are the opportunities? Where are the pain points in the market? And how can I address those pain points and create value? I mean, even like if you think about like my second book and now I'm like working on a third book, right? It's like really being aware and curious and like what's going on in the world, like what,
Yeah.
right? Because you want to make sure, especially in the nonfiction space that you're writing a book that's actually needed, and wanted.
Yeah, sure. So there are a couple things that are particularly unique about your story and your journey that I think is important for people to understand, in that you were 20 years into a corporate career. And I think that's a really important data point to reinforce, because you had both established professional credibility, you had a nest egg, you had the financial sort of cushion, if you will, to really take some financial risks that I think oftentimes are harder either earlier in your career or, depending upon an individual's circumstances. And so I do think that's just an important piece to remember, especially because there's so many folks that maybe are on the younger side who are having trouble post-COVID staying in the workforce because, so much of it is remote. It's difficult to figure out how to work up that ladder. So I'd love any advice that you want to share for kind of things that people should keep in mind before thinking about engaging in a multi-hyphenate or portfolio existence, or career, rather.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think for sure you're right, just in terms of really doing a little bit of an assessment, an audit of your financials. And, is this something financially that makes sense for you? Or would it make sense to stay in corporate for a little bit longer and, build that nest egg? I feel like we have different levels of risk tolerance at different points in our lives. Like, I know when I was in my late 20s, I actually made a really risky career move by leaving Coca-Cola to go to MoviePhone, which was like an early stage company. But I could do that because my husband had a very stable job. We didn't have kids yet. Like, I felt like, hey, if I'm going to make this kind of move, like, now's the time to do it, right? So I think just being really honest with yourself about your financials, about your risk tolerance, and not making any rash decisions. I mean, look, I just had a conversation recently with a friend of mine who's been in corporate for 30 years, and she's really feeling bored and she wants to leave and do like a portfolio career or just like do something entrepreneurial but when I really taught, I asked her some questions around her financial situation, and what came out was she's the primary breadwinner. Her husband is not bringing in any income right now because he just started an entrepreneurial venture. Their kids are going off to college soon. So when you talk through all of these things, my advice to her was like, why don't you stay in the job where you're making a lot of money, but start something on the side and see if you can build it, and then you'll just feel more confident, like leaving the company to go do this new thing, because you want to make sure that there's a there and that you're enjoying it. It's a big risk, like where she is in her life right now. It would be a huge risk to leave. If anything, see if there's like a different role in the company that you might get more enjoyment out of. But sometimes I feel like we get so frustrated with where we are, and it's just like this rash decision of like, grass is always greener on the other side. I'm just gonna leave. I'm gonna make this like big jump and everything's gonna be great. And I just always encourage people, like, take a minute, just really think it through.
Such good advice. One of the other topics that I think is oftentimes maybe not talked about, and I think this is, at least it was an issue for me and still is to some degree, because I did something somewhat similar to what you did and created a portfolio of things that I wanted to work on with a lot of flexibility around what I was doing. But one of the things that I've struggled with so much is when I go to a cocktail party and someone says, oh, where do you spend your time? What do you do? What do you do for a living? And it's like this complicated answer that can go in so many different directions, because I do all sorts of things, a lot like you. So maybe advice for how do you answer this question?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I can so relate to this. So what I ended up, because I was really struggling with this myself. And a few years ago, what I ended up deciding to do, and it really kind of works for me, is I start off by saying, I spend my time leveling the playing field for women. And I do that through my writing, my speaking, and my investing. And so instead of like, I'm an author and I'm a speaker and I'm it's like, what's the through line for all of the things that you're working on? And start with that. And people then get it, because then it's like, oh, okay, that's what you're passionate about. That's what you're spending your time doing. And what are the different forms that takes, right? So I feel like that has worked better for me, for sure. But no, definitely, like there's still, if I'm speaking for a company's like women's ERG, they don't really care about Bookbound. What they care about is that I was a corporate executive and that I'm a women's leadership expert, that I read these books, right? So it's like, that's the way I'm positioning myself there. If I'm speaking at a book publishing conference, what they care about is that I'm an author and a book coach. And so I do still find that I need to, kind of modify a little bit. But if you're meeting somebody at like a cocktail party, like to me, that's the easiest way.
Yeah.
And the clearest way to do it.
I love that. That's so incredibly smart. Okay, let's pivot and talk about specifically about Bookbound. We've talked a little bit about where the idea came from, largely in writing your own book and navigating this just tremendous complexity around getting a book published. So maybe talk a little bit more about sort of how you decided to embark on creating a company around this and your partnership with Bethany, which is terrific. So maybe just talk a little bit about kind of how it came to be and what you're doing.
Well, it's interesting in terms of like creating a company. I'll be honest. I think the reason I created a company was because it was really uncomfortable for me when people would ask me for advice about their nonfiction book idea. And it was hard for me without a company to say like, okay, well, here are my services.
Exactly.
This is
how do you charge? Yes.
This is what I'm going to charge, because, people just kind of expect that the advice is going to be free. Like,
yes.
So I really felt like it was important to value my time and my expertise and my network by creating, this business, this brand, this platform. Because then, I have the website and I have, here are my services. And so it makes it official. It makes it clear that this is something that I'm doing as a profession. So that was really kind of the tactical reason for doing it. But in terms of like myself and like what I care about and the impact that I'm making, it's just, I really love this work. And I love helping women and some men too. It's just, it tends to be more women that come to me. But I love helping them think through their idea and how can we sharpen it and really make it something that's special, that's going to stand out in a very crowded market, helping them think through like, how should the book be published? There's so many different ways to publish a book now, right? And then like even kind of on the back end, once the book is coming out, helping them with the launch, helping them with the marketing. So it's work that's really fulfilling for me. And even within Bookbound, I talked about planting seeds. I'm still doing that, right? I'm trying stuff and I'm kind of seeing like what's taking, what's not, which programs are people responding to, which ones are, like, for example, I'll give you a perfect example where I was trying to do kind of these in-person, like smaller workshops. And it was really hard. Like people are really like used to just getting on a Zoom. They love the fact that there's no travel time, like they just save so much time. And the Zoom sessions have been much more successful. And there could be a world where I could see like, okay, it's like an 8-week program over Zoom. And then maybe at the end, there's like an in-person gathering where we all come together, But it's, and then also like I really loved working with Bethany on some of the programs. Like Bethany Saltman is this amazing book coach. She's a really good friend. So we were co-hosts of the Bookbound podcast. we just launched this Substack together. So there's like all this free content that's available too, which is really important to me. But we did this accelerator that you were in,
Yeah.
Laura. We
Amazing.
absolutely loved. We had 28 women go through that program, that 8-week program. And I'm sure we'll do it again at some point next year, you know? But, you know, it's fun. It's fun to collaborate, right? So
Yeah.
it's fun, like, to say, you know, on these, for these programs, I get to work with Bethany, and it just brings, like, you know, we inspire each other and we love working together. So that's great too.
Yeah. One of the other beautiful things about Bookbound that I frankly had not appreciated as fully until I participated in the program was the sense of community, not the sense, but the actual community that you build with writers who are, or authors who are would-be authors who are working on very different projects, but that shared experience of refining an idea and finding something that's maybe counterintuitive, something that has been written about, but maybe not quite the way that you would write about it, which is all part of what you and Bethany do such a beautiful job of sharing and really fostering this notion of a community, and women that will even well past the program will stay in touch with and connect with. Beautiful.
I love that. And you know, look, when we write, we're usually alone. It's a very lonely process.
Right.
So the idea of being able to come together once a week and look, the program ended, a few months ago, but we still have that Google group.
Right.
That women are still posting stuff in, you know, like we have one participant who just launched a Substack, and she shared it with everybody, and everyone showed her some love and engagement. And it really is like an instant launch team. Like, I'm so excited for like the first book to actually come out of the group, because everyone's going to be supportive, you know? So yeah, I do. I'm so happy you brought up community, because when I think about Bookbound, I really think that what we offer is, it's 3 pillars. It's content, it's community, and it's coaching, right? And like the content is the stuff we talked about, the podcast, the Substack, like even Instagram. Community is the accelerator program. And we're launching, I'm really excited about this. We're launching this How to Read Like a Writer book club that launches in January. And it's 1 book a month over 7 months, where we basically go through a nonfiction book.
Amazing.
And we read it like writers, meaning we're really looking at like, oh, I wonder, like, why did they structure the book this way? And the title and the subtitle, like, what can we learn from this? And the voice and the tone and how they open the chapter and close the chapter and the editorial mix. And so it'll be like a really fun way, community, again, like over Zoom, but just a really fun way to learn how to be a better writer, how to develop your nonfiction book by reading other successful books.
Yeah.
So that's another program that we're, again, planting a seed, right?
Yeah.
So that's part of community. And then coaching, Bethany and I, we both take on like a limited number of clients that we each work with independently, which are kind of longer term, a little bit more like hand-holding. Maybe it's like writing a full book proposal,
Right.
or working on a marketing plan, that kind of stuff. So for me too, like the content coaching community just came to me a few months ago, because I was trying to think about how to describe the services. And that was really helpful to me. Sometimes you just need like a framework.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's like, okay, so everything we do, like everything I do with Bethany, should fall into one of these 3 buckets.
Yeah.
So that was also really helpful in terms of framing the business and the services.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely love that. It's interesting. Some of the stuff that you included in the workbook, maybe in Myth of the Nice Girl as well. You have a 4-point model that you talk about, and I'm curious as to how that model has come into play, and if you've refined it at all as you have used it in different ways.
Yeah, so I call it the 4 square. It's my 4 square model. I still use it. I have it literally in my tablet, and I look at it all the time. But the 4 square, so the 4 squares are me, family, career, and world. And in each one of those squares, I think about like, what are the 2 or 3 things that I want to make sure that I'm prioritizing, that I'm really spending the bulk of my time on. So it really, and I revisit it regularly and I change things up. I take things off, I add things, but it is so helpful to me because when I look at my calendar, like every Friday, like I look at my calendar for the week ahead and I look for alignment with my Foursquare, right? Because if it's off, like if I'm spending 80% of my time on things that are not on my Foursquare, like why? Like what's going on there? So it's so grounding for me to do this work. It's like very reflective. Like I really believe, and I write about this a lot, in the importance of getting out of autopilot mode and making time to reflect. And this Foursquare model is a huge part of that because it's like, what are the big things? What are the things that are going to move the needle for me and for my business? What are the things that I really care about? Like when we came out of COVID, I remember for family, I had 2 things written down, fun and travel. And those were the 2 things that I just really wanted to prioritize for the kids because I felt like it was, a couple of years where they didn't have that, and it was like really helpful to remember that, like as a North Star. So, yeah, like when I think about the career square, right, I'm always like thinking about, okay, where do I want to spend my time? And it's usually like a quarter. It's usually like the next 3 months. Where are the areas? Like, for example, this was a big decision, big decision I made about a year ago to really step back from startup investing. After doing that for 10 years, invested in over 40 companies. And I just felt like I wasn't enjoying as much getting those pitch decks emailed to me, asking for feedback. You have to pay attention to how you feel and like, what are the things that you're procrastinating and like kind of putting off? And I also realized like I had made all these investments and I had these founders who really needed me to help them. And to kind of, so I made this like really big decision to double down on my existing portfolio and not make new investments. And I communicated that. Like I put it in my newsletter. I put it on my website. Like literally, it's like you have to make clear if there are things that you are no longer doing. This is really important, actually, Laura. I don't think we've ever talked about this. We talk about this portfolio career, right? If your brand is all about like, okay, these are the different things that I'm doing. If you intentionally decide to stop doing one of those things, you need to let people know.
Absolutely.
Right.
Mhm.
And so like, it's scary. It's like, I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, like if I say this though, it's done. Like I'm not doing this anymore. But I did. Like I could go back and show you my newsletter where I opened the newsletter with, hey, I made this really big decision. And I explained to people why I made the decision. And I also explained to them how it impacted my whole digital content strategy. Like how does this investing piece come off and the Bookbound piece,
Yeah.
is now more relevant.
Right.
So how do I like recalibrate everything as a multi-hyphenate, right?
Yeah.
So I'm glad you brought that up because I've never really talked about that before. The idea of like if you're going to stop doing something, you need to let people know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And I love how the way that you approach this is all about balance. I mean, I think we get so obsessed with this concept of work-life balance, but this is what it means. It means prioritization, and it means being really intentional with understanding what your values are and which of those things fit in which buckets and how can you allocate your time, because there's only 24 hours in a day and we're
That's
not going to
it.
be working during all, or capable of working during all 24 hours. There are people who need us for most of
Yeah.
us, and that remembering to allocate time and resources for all of those things and being really intentional about it, I think is just so smart and so thoughtful. It's one of many reasons why I always love these conversations with you and have loved working with you so much. Where can people find you and Bookbound, Fran?
Well, first of all, Laura, thank you so much. I just adore you and I
Ah,
love everything that you're doing and building. It's been so fun to kind of watch you building but then also as a friend,
Oh, thank you.
to really kind of get an inside look at it. So it's just all so amazing. In terms of where people can find me, I'm on franhauser.com. I also have a website for Bookbound, which is bookboundco.com. And on social media, I spend most of my time on Instagram and LinkedIn. Those are the two platforms where people could find me.
Fantastic. Fran, thank you so much. I am truly grateful not only for this conversation, but for your friendship and for all of your help. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Laura.
I don't know about you, but I am feeling so inspired after that conversation with Fran. She is truly a shining example of how we can create these portfolio or multi-hyphenate careers that really help us align with our values and passion. Now, Fran has been a role model to me for several years, and I hope you got some great inspiration from her in this episode as well. If you're ready to explore your own career reinvention, head to our show notes for links to Fran's books, to her website. And if you are an aspiring nonfiction author, I can't recommend Bookbound highly enough. Check that out. It is fantastic. And also, don't forget to follow Fran on social media. Thanks so much for joining us here on She Said, She Said. We'll be back next week with another incredible guest, so make sure you're subscribed or follow so you don't miss it. Until then, friend, you take care. And remember, She Said, She Said podcast is a weekly production of She Said, She Said Media.